The ex-priest turned and looked at the kid. And that was the judge, first ever I saw him. Aye, he's a thing to study. The lad looked at Tobin. What's he a judge of? He said. What's he a judge of? What's he a judge of? Tobin glanced off across the fire. Ah, lad, he said. Hush now. The man will hear ye. He's ears like a fox. The Glanton gang's first meeting with Judge Holden is told by the former seminarian turned scalper, Ben Tobin, to the kid as they sit around a campfire one night. Tobin relates how the decimated gang, out of black powder for their guns, were being pursued by a war band of Apaches. The Indians trailed them, riding 4 and 6 abreast, and there was no short supply of them, and they were in no hurry. Every man jack of us knew that in some God-forsook land somewhere was a draw or a cul-de-sac, or perhaps just a pile of rocks, and there we'd be driven to stand with those empty guns. On a solitary rock, jutting from the desert floor, sat Holden, smiling as we rode up, like he'd been expecting us. While Glanton creates a diversion for him, Holden gathers saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur, from which the judge is able to concoct powder for their guns. They make their stand on the slope of a volcano, whose rumblings were once thought to be the agonized souls of wicked kings by the Aztecs. This incident actually echoes a similar event in Milton's Paradise Lost, in which the archfiend Satan creates gunpowder to assist the rebel angels' assault on heaven. Whereto with look composed Satan replied, Not uninvented that, which thou were right believest so main to our success, I bring. Which of us who beholds the bright surface of this ethereous mold whereon we stand, this continent of spacious heaven, adorned with plant, fruit, flower, ambrosial, gems, and gold, whose eye so superficially surveys these things as not to mind from whence they grow deep underground, materials dark and crude, of spirituous and fiery spume, till touched with heaven's ray and tempered they shoot forth, so beauteous, opening to the ambient light. These in their dark nativity the deep shall yield us pregnant with infernal flame, which into hollow engines long and round, thick rammed at the other bore with touch of fire, dilated and infuriate, shall send forth from far the thundering noise among our foes such implements of mischief as shall dash to pieces and o'erwhelm whatever stands adverse, that they shall fear we have disarmed the thunder of his only dreaded bolt. Holden, too, is a master of materials dark and crude, from which he crafts his own implements of mischief. In a similar way, we can see how the author of Blood Meridian, Cormac McCarthy, drew from the materials of previous writers, from Milton to Melville, in order to craft his magnum opus. The ugly fact is books are made out of books. The novel depends for its life on the novels that have been written. The American literary movement most often associated with our author is that of the Southern Gothic, in which the dark romanticism of Melville and Hawthorne is played out in the setting of the American South. The most famous author of this kind of fiction was William Faulkner, whose novels and short stories, set in the fictional Mississippi county of Yoknapatawpha, won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1949. McCarthy's early fiction, set in the Appalachian Mountains, is often compared with Faulkner's and is usually classified as Southern Gothic for the themes of violence and alienation that run throughout. Faulkner's retelling of the story of King David in Absalom, Absalom centers around the character of Thomas Sutpen, a self-made man in the image of Andrew Jackson, who attempts in vain to build a plantation dynasty in northern Mississippi during the antebellum period. Jackson, a Southerner and slaveholder, would also serve as the inspiration for another icon of American literature. One of the biggest influences on Blood Meridian is McCarthy's favorite novel. Herman Melville's Moby Dick is set on the high seas, with the masts and rigging of a whaling ship replacing the spires and flying buttresses of the Gothic cathedral. Several scenes from Moby Dick are directly paralleled in Blood Meridian, just as Ishmael and Queequeg are given dark portents by the sailor prophet Elijah after signing aboard the Pequod, so too is the kid warned of disaster by a Mennonite before joining with Captain White's ill-fated filibustering expedition. The Mennonite watches the enshadowed dark before them as it is reflected to him in the mirror over the bar. He turns to them. His eyes are wet. He speaks slowly. The wrath of God lies sleeping. It was hid 1,000,000 years before men were, and only men have the power to wake it. Hell ain't half full. Hear me. Ye carry war of a madman's making into a foreign land. You'll wake more than the dogs. Another scene from Moby Dick that is adapted in Blood Meridian is a famous scene from chapter 123, The Musket, in which the first mate Starbuck, holding the death tube, contemplates whether or not to kill the tyrannical Captain Ahab in order to end once and for all the futile pursuit of the white whale and save the ship. Ultimately, he cannot bring himself to kill the old man. Chapter 12 of Blood Meridian has a variation of this scene, play out between Toadvine and Judge Holden. On the third night they crouched in the keep of old walls of slump mud, with the fires of the enemy not a mile distant on the desert. The judge sat with the Apache boy before the fire, and it watched everything with dark, berry eyes, and some of the men played with it, and made it laugh, and they gave it jerky, and it sat chewing, and watching gravely the figures that passed above it. They covered it with a blanket, and in the morning the judge was dandling it on one knee, while the men saddled their horses. Toadvine saw him with the child as he passed with his saddle, but when he came back 10 minutes later, leading the horse, the child was dead, and the judge had scalped it. Toadvine put the muzzle of his pistol against the great dome of the judge's head. "God damn you, Holden. You either shoot or take that away. Do it now." Toadvine put the pistol in his belt. The judge smiled, and wiped the scalp on the leg of his trousers, and rose and turned away. Another 10 minutes, and they were on the plain again, in full flight from the Apaches. In Judge Holden, we see the whiteness of the whale combined with the monomaniacal evil of Ahab, as the Glanton gang hunts humans for scalps, with the same enthusiasm as the Nantucket whaleman hunts cetaceans for oil. It is no coincidence that both Holden and Ahab find a common ancestor in Milton's Satan, arguably a model for both. Another possible inspiration for Holden is the character of Mephistopheles, a devil from hell come to make a bargain for the soul of the scholar Faust, granting him unlimited pleasure and power until the day his soul is to be collected. Holden, too, has struck up a bargain with Glanton. As Tobin says to the kid, "They've a secret commerce, some terrible covenant. You mind, you'll see I'm right." Though the devil is rarely portrayed as a glutton, Holden's corpulence is emphasized by McCarthy. It may be that the relationship between Holden and the kid is meant to be a twisted parody of that between Prince Hal and the Knight of the Rotund Constitution, Falstaff, described in Henry IV, Part 1 as "that villainous, abominable misleader of youth, that old white-bearded Satan." Falstaff, despite his shortcomings, is depicted as a comical and benevolent figure who genuinely loves his young protege Hal, and is crushed by the prince's rejection of him. Whereas Holden is a wholly malevolent figure, who after being rejected by the kid, despite his persistent wooing, determines to destroy him completely. Despite his fictional forebears, Holden remains one of the most unique characters in American fiction. Indeed, McCarthy gives voice to some anxiety of influence when he has the kid describe Holden as follows. Whatever his antecedents, he was something wholly other than their sum, nor was there system by which to divide him back into his origins, for he would not go. Holden's lack of definite origins suggests his nature to be more than merely human. It is the transmundane side of Holden and of Blood Meridian itself that we will explore in Episode 3.